Welcome to TFR Let's Talk. I'm your host, Swapnil Bhartia, and my next guest is Karen Gondoly, CEO of Leostream. Karen, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, Swap. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and chat with you for a while.
Yeah, since this is the first time I'm talking to you, so I would love to know a bit about the company itself. What do you folks do?
So Leostream provides a vendor-neutral remote access platform. And now what we need to do is kind of pick apart that sentence. So our core tenet is to be vendor neutral to the rest of a hosted desktop environment. So people can host their VDI instances in the cloud if they want, or on virtualization on-prem, or you can just take the V out entirely and they could be physical workstations. What we want to provide is a platform that manages access to these resources no matter where they are and no matter where the user's connecting from and how they need to connect. We remain vendor neutral to the display protocol as well. So that's the whole idea, is allow our customers to build a solution that works best for their environment instead of locking them into a single vendor stack.
If you do look at the way market is moving, we are moving towards cloud. Last year, actually, the pandemic accelerated digital transformation and cloud adoption. If I ask you, what are you seeing happening in this space? Because there are still a lot of companies who are still trying in their very early phase of their cloud journey. So from Leostream's perspective, where do you see the whole multi-cloud, hybrid cloud story moving, and what role do you play there?
So it's definitely true, particularly since the beginning of the pandemic, we've seen a lot more companies moving towards cloud. And even before pandemic, we saw people starting to kind of kick the tires, what workloads are appropriate in the cloud. But then they just kind of went full force once the pandemic hit. The other thing that we've seen a little uptick in is, OpenStack is one of those cloud options. A lot of people, when they think about the cloud, it's, well, are you going to put your resources in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform? But OpenStack is another way of building a private cloud, either in your own data center, or there's a number of different service providers who are building clouds based on OpenStack as well. And so it's really, people are trying to look at which cloud is the best based on which type of workflow that they want to run. And also based on some of their corporate standards. Are they a Microsoft shop? In which case they tend to focus more on Azure. The strength that we as a Leostream platform brings to people who are going down this multi-cloud or hybrid cloud path is that we support all of these different clouds already. So that allows IT to have a single management platform where they can spin up machines in Azure or maybe integrate with an OpenStack cloud. And they don't have to go to the individual management platforms for each of those clouds separately.
A cloud, is a big, giant, buzzword. Different people use it for different reasons. You also, talked about public cloud versus private cloud, which is OpenStack. And then we are also seeing emergence of edge computing, which you can, depending on how you look at it, it could be edge data center or it could be edge devices, IoT devices. So where does Leostream enter the picture when we look at this massive cloud adoption?
So for Leostream, it really doesn't matter from our perspective as a platform where your users are located, the type of client devices they're coming from, or where the resources you want to connect them to live. There are different, so when we talk about working with a cloud specifically, that means we've integrated with their APIs so we can automate spinning up capacity and scaling in the cloud as appropriate based on demand. But essentially any device that's out there that you put our Leostream agent on, you can now wrap the management of that device into the Leostream platform. So if you have devices that are out on the edge, fine, just put our agent on them. And then obviously the networking needs to work out because the agents need to be able to communicate back with the broker. But you can manage all of this from a single platform. And the nice thing there too, not just from IT managing, but what we've noticed is it's really important for end users to have a single portal that they go to get access to what they need. Because the end user doesn't really care where the resource is running. They just know they need to get access to it.
Right. And when you say end user, once again, it can be seen from different perspective. End user could be a home user. End user can also be a developer. End user can. So who would be end user for Leostream?
Really just about anyone. It depends on the industry. And we really are a cross-industry platform. So we've done a lot with education. You can imagine, K through 12 and higher ed, all their students went home. So now the people who were the end users for us were the students in this case. So now they may not necessarily be technologically savvy. They might not have the type of client device you're expecting them to have. So you needed to use Leostream to provide access to these types of users. But then also another industry we've done a lot with over the last year and a half or so is media and entertainment. So now these were post-production engineers who needed to get access to pretty intense applications and big data sets that they were coming in. Maybe those were running up in the cloud. So the end user could really be just about anybody.
Right. And if you do look at the workloads, and if you do look at these two use cases, one is students and one is media production, what are the workloads are you looking at? Are we looking at the Windows machines as virtual machines, or we are looking at applications running in the virtual environment where you totally abstract the OS?
Ultimately what the user or the student, post-production engineer, whoever they are, ultimately what they need access to is the application and the data. Then it's a matter of what is that application running on, where is that data hosted? With our customers and in the environments we support, it's again, we're vendor neutral to that back end. So in a lot of the schools, what they had were actual labs full of Macs, like hardware Macs, and they needed to provide remote access to Mac OS. For one of our M&E customers, Nice Shoes, what they had was a bunch of machines running up in AWS. So these are Windows machines now running there. But then we had other customers who needed access to Linux. So again, for us, the operating system isn't as important. We can manage it from the end user's perspective. What they really need is the application, and it's a matter of what that runs on.
So somebody is running their Macs, their application, and they just want people to be able to access those through thin client over the internet. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. It's really about two things. It's authenticating the user, making sure only the appropriate user has access, which becomes incredibly important once you're giving access to the internet. And then it's a matter of, okay, once you've authenticated them and said, yes, they can get into my systems, which systems do they have permission to access? Those are really the two key roles that we provide, is be the gateway in a sense to block access based on authentication, and then provide the access control rules that say what do they have access to once they get there. And then there's the third step of actually connecting the user, but first two are the primary.
Now the vaccine is here. We are expecting to go back to normal, but once people have tasted that, they don't have to go on premise, they don't have to be in the office, they don't have to commute, they can do all the work, from their desktop. So talk about what trends are you seeing, especially from the virtualization stack perspective?
Right. So definitely, I don't think remote work is going away anytime soon. I think it's very true that people have gotten accustomed to avoiding the commute. I enjoy avoiding my commute. But the other thing that I think organizations have realized as they've rolled these remote access technologies into their environments is that it's actually opened up new workflows and made people more productive in ways that they might not have had actually expected. In the case of the universities, now they had labs that could be accessible to people. So I had one university that actually had done some really neat analysis by pulling data out of their Leostream environment to show where the student base was logging in from. And they realized that they had more of an international presence than they might necessarily have been. So now what they can do is actually attract new students who might otherwise not be able to attend that university because they can provide remote access to the resources that they need. So that was just one really, really kind of neat example. And then the other thing they found were, students were accessing the labs at times where usually those machines would be idle. So now they could do the homework at different times and actually be productive. And the machines could remain productive off hours when they weren't normally being utilized. So I think as we move forward, there's going to be more and more ways that just providing access to resources from anywhere, whether that be a virtual machine or a physical machine, and maybe even more importantly, the physical machines, because people can't pick them up and take them home. It's going to just really open up new business opportunities.
Yeah, you touched about something that is also a very critical factor is when we look at the traditional ITA, is like if the light is blinking, the server is on, you're paying the bills. With virtualization or cloud, what happened was that you can, virtualize, relocate resources. Now, there are two things that I'm looking at. First of all, let's say there's an organization, they have ample of resources, but some resources are on this location, some resources on some other location. Let's say school, right? They have 5 campuses, and same way their students may be coming from different countries, Africa, Asia, no matter, you don't know where they're coming from. So does it also help in not only using the resources in a better way, because you can allocate resources from X location to cater to the students or employees from the Y location, so that what you're doing is you are not only making people access those technologies remotely, you're also helping companies use their resources in a better way.
Right, exactly. And it's not just about, it's in case of physical hardware, we can help you manage, if you have a lab of machines or a library. We have one school that's using us for resources connected to the library. Students are going to start going back on campus. People are going to start going back in the office. So now you can have, in an office, you can have a hot desking set up where people just walk up to terminals and log in. But then some of those terminals are going to be used by remote users, and we can help manage that organization so that, a remote user gets a machine, now the physical user can't get it, and vice versa. So that's a neat way of managing resources. And then in the cloud, we have a number of tools for helping with the automation. So once a student's done with a machine, or the post-production engineer logs off, or their job finishes running, based on CPU levels, we can tell that. Then we know, okay, now this machine's done, power it off, maybe even terminate it, so you're not paying for that compute in the cloud.
We have talked about the rosy picture, all the nice things that you are doing. Let's talk about what are the challenges that are there in the commercial virtualization stacks market.
Well, I think I kind of break these down into three themes. One is obviously the technology itself. When you look at these big commercial virtualization stacks that have built up, they've built up over a number of years, and they've, in a sense, become almost bloated. They, first of all, lock you into their stack. Once you pick one, it's hard for you to move out of that stack, and you've already invested a lot in that. So to try some new technology is different. So the technologies themselves just kind of lock you in, I think, is the first challenge. And the second flows off of that, which is the cost. Now, once you're locked into the stack, if you do find out you need a new feature, often that comes with additional costs, and that makes it harder to predict year to year. What are your licensing fees going to be? Because now if a new use case comes up, now you need to upgrade to the premier version, and maybe you hadn't anticipated that cost. And then the third, I think, is really just around a philosophy. And some of that philosophy is the fact that they lock you into their technology. But I think it's also these commercial stacks are provided by large vendors. And not to say that they're not as customer focused, but it's just a little more difficult from a customer perspective to work with a large organization. So to have a philosophy of a smaller company where we're very customer focused, I think that's a big advantage for us, and just one of the challenges that will come about when working with one of these large commercial stacks.
Can you also talk about how much open source you are using in your products, and how are you planning to give back to the community?
So I guess I never mentioned, but all of our components do run on Linux. So because we are Linux-based, there are obviously a lot of open source components that make that up. For example, just OpenSSL is one of them. Our HTML5 viewer, which is included in our gateway, it's Apache Guacamole. So we're big proponents of the open source community. One of the ways that we've been looking and investigating how best do we contribute back to it is particularly through the OpenStack community. We love the OpenStack platform. We've supported it as a VDI platform for probably 4 or 5 years now. And so we want to look at how do we get more involved with that community in particular.
Karen, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about not only Leostream, but also how things are changing and how you are enabling, of course, you mentioned 2 use cases, people, companies, organizations, to be able to do the job that they love without having to move. And also, we are going through a transition, right? The culture is going to change, and virtualization is playing a very critical role there. So thanks for talking to me today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.
So thanks so much for having me.